And tonight, breaking news out of Baltimore as 6 police officers have been indicted for the death of Freddie Gray. Meanwhile, violence in Baltimore has spiked. The question is why? Grover Norquist joins the show to discuss a new tax plan currently being cooked up in Oregon. Democrats in Iowa are having a hard time naming Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's accomplishments. And finally, Letterman leaves them cheering during his final broadcast. We talk about all that, plus much more in Yay and Nay. This is The Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And tonight on The Wrap, some familiar faces. My co-host and Sirius XM radio star, Rick Unger, is back.
Back with the star
spry,
thing.
yes.
Like
to
that.
his right, Philly attorney and America's pundit, she is Heather Hansen. And finally, he's an author, spiritual leader, and editor of the Wisdom Daily. Brad Hirschfield is back as well. Okay, everybody, let's get right to the Daily Download. And in 2016 campaign news, Hillary Clinton returns to the first in-the-nation primary state of New Hampshire tomorrow. She might want to consider returning to Iowa. That's because her supporters there couldn't point to any of her accomplishments as Secretary of State.
I really can't name anything off the top of my head.
Give me a minute. Give me 2 minutes to go someplace else.
Okay, Christina, can you think of something that she accomplished as Secretary of State that impressed you or thinks important?
No.
Heard a couple of crickets, amazingly enough, in that. Boy, that was tough to put that woman on the spot. Painful to watch, no doubt. Not one supporter, as you saw, can name any accomplishments. And while that may be shocking, the Washington Post notes that it's not that unusual for voters to be unable to recite a politician's track record. Rick, could this be a problem for Hillary Clinton?
Absolutely not. And not only is it not unusual to not know a politician's track record, they don't know anything that a Secretary of State does. However, I do, because I'm getting a little bit tired of this narrative that started with this, and I brought a few fun facts.
Okay.
Things that Hillary did as Secretary of State, I wrote them down, I hope you don't mind.
Not at all.
She was personally responsible for establishing the coalition that made the Iranian sanctions effective. She put all those countries together. Secondly, she negotiated the Russian-U.S. nuclear reduction under the New START provisions. She's the one who obtained the armistice in the 2012 Gaza-Israeli conflict. She substantially, well, this is the one where people argue. According to polls taken around the world by respected pollsters, she single-handedly improved the way we were viewed after the previous administration. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Can anybody here list even 1 or 2 of the accomplishments of General Powell or Condi Rice, who both of which I thought were perfectly good secretaries of state?
Sure.
What did they do?
Powell, you can go with the Iraq War again.
No, as a general, not as
a Secretary of State.
Not as right.
Was that an accomplishment?
Yes, and here's why. Because he conducted himself with relative honesty and transparency. He reached the wrong conclusion. But I think your point is well taken. But I want to add to it, Rick. You are the same wise pundit who walked in a couple of weeks ago, having been asked that question at another network.
I was.
And you said, I really can't think of anything.
And it's because I couldn't.
And I think it points.
Right.
It's not playing gotcha. I think it points to the insight of your first point.
It's why I went and studied.
It's not the individual accomplishments. Maybe it should be, and maybe this should be a problem for her. And there may be a lot of us who wish it would be a problem for her. But if we're going to answer your question, Joe, is it likely to be a problem in the election? For better or worse, the answer is no. And
that's correct, because at the end of that town hall, they actually asked one guy, they said, well, if you can't name anything, then why would you vote for her? He said, well, Scott Walker's going to break up the unions, and I'm in a union, and she's accomplished a lot. I can't name them, but I know she's accomplished a lot. In other words, she was Secretary of State and she was a senator. Right. What she did isn't unimportant. That she held those positions seems to be good enough.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And I think also people aren't that interested, even in the accomplishments that you just named. They are more interested in how am I going to bring some money home and feed my kids? How am I going to make sure that there's no terrorists coming into my neighborhood? That stuff isn't all that important in this election.
You're absolutely right. In fact, most people, even having heard that list, are going, huh? What was that?
It's already gone. It's
Right.
gone.
It's
Even though it's
gone.
real stuff,
That's right.
It's gone.
And that's the whole thing. You're a respected pundit. You've been doing this forever. You have a column. All you do is eat and breathe politics. Yet
And
You had to
Sean
look it up.
Hannity tripped me up when he asked me the question. He did.
Well, he knows ninja, so it could have been worse. Anyway, billionaire Donald Trump says he'll announce sometime next month whether he'll run for president. He's showing some signs he's making a serious run this time. Mr. Trump has hired campaign staff in Iowa and in South Carolina. And he's been making lots of media appearances where he's taken some shots at potential rivals because he's never done that before. Here's what he said about Jeb Bush on Fox last night.
I think he's a reluctant warrior. I think he doesn't want to be running. I don't know why he's running. He looks unhappy. He looks like he just doesn't want to be there.
Donald looks very happy in that clip.
And that's exactly why he probably shouldn't be running. A case was once made by a couple of philosophers that by definition, anyone who really wanted the job wasn't fit to be president. Right. So I think actually Donald Trump just gave a ringing endorsement to Jeb Bush, who's willing to run for this office and do it well if he gets elected, but not because he's in love with himself as president, unlike the Donald.
May I play contrarian?
Sure.
Okay, so he didn't hire a staff last time at all for Iowa, for South Carolina, right? So maybe that makes him look more serious. And also, people do like his candor. He does get the speech at CPAC. He can get any interview he wants because he rates, because he will say something interesting, and he's unfiltered.
Right.
So is he like a Chris Christie with better hair?
No. People like to listen to him.
Well, not better, more.
Okay, there's so much wrong with that.
No way with
Never
better
heard of
hair.
But go with the substance of the question.
Listen, I mean,
The hairline is low. I mean, that's something to be proud of at 64 or whatever he is, right?
well, there was that whole SNL thing about whether or not if he ran, how much that would increase ratings. People like to listen to him talk. Nobody wants to be led by him. Right. It's just not going to happen. And I think that in many ways he's going to. We talked about this a little bit before, and since then I've decided he's going to make this worse because he's going to be making points that are taking the conversations away from where they should be.
So the question is why, if he did run?
Well, I actually, for the first time, I think he is going to run. I actually do. I believe him this time. Why? Because a couple of reasons. One, I'm sure he's smarting that people like us sit here and make fun of him pretending he's going to run.
I'll show you.
So now he's going to show us. That's number one. Number two, his show's not back on this year. And number three, what better way to keep yourself in the public eye? And Donald lives for the public eye than to actually run for president.
So the beast gets hungrier the more you feed it.
Of course, he's not going to make it into the debate, so that's going to be a problem for him.
He actually polled well last time when he was thinking of running.
I don't think he'll poll well enough in this group.
Okay, well, certainly a lot of competition, no question about it. Anyway, the first 2016 presidential debate will be held August 6th, mark your calendars, in Ohio. Looks like a little home state advantage for one guy who'll probably be running. Fox News is moderating the debate, and they say they will limit the participants to a number of, anybody want to guess? 10. Okay. The field of 2016 Republicans could approach 20 candidates. And Fox says the top 10 candidates in the most recent polls will be invited to the stage. Fox says the Republican National Committee approved the decision, but party elder Newt Gingrich says there ought to be a way for all legitimate candidates to debate. So, Heather, is this the right call for Fox?
I think it is. I mean, I would love to hear from all of them, but to hear from all of them at once, I think is a little bit much. There's a great article in today's Wall Street Journal by Daniel Henninger talking about having a series of smaller debates where they can go off against each other. We can hear their real ideas, and they actually have time to discuss them. And then somehow, I think we talked about this in the show before about brackets. Somehow then bring it back
March
to
Madness.
the survival of the fittest. I mean, that really is going to make people best able to deal with Hillary.
It's so like Newt Gingrich to say, this is not good, and then stop.
Right.
Well,
what's the solution?
maybe he'll run. Maybe he's not happy at
God
CNN.
forbid he
Everyone
should
else
tell
seems
us how
to
to
be
do
good.
it, right?
Yeah, I just think that the arbitrary nature of 10 is misguided. You do have to limit it for that reason. Oh, you can have just sound bites. I would have preferred them to set a threshold, whether it's 2%, 3%, 5%, and then if it turns out that that's fewer than 10, great. It's not going to be more than 10. I think there's something, don't be arbitrary. If you capture the public attention at a certain threshold, you're in. If you don't, I think Henninger's right. Find some other format so we can't hear from those people.
What, and I'm putting you on the spot here, what candidate who has a big name or somewhat big name you think will not make the cut?
Does Santorum count as a big name?
Yes, who I was going to say.
He's already spoken today and said that he thinks it's unfair.
won't
He and
make the cut.
Kasich are tied, I think, for just barely making the cut if
He's
you
not gonna
went
make
right
it.
now.
Wait till Kasich announces.
I was going to say Santorum too. I have to say he is. I mean, he is a big name because he actually won a
Won the
number of
right?
primaries.
Iowa.
Yes, basically
4
for the
years
second
ago.
last time.
Yeah.
Right.
He's the most disingenuous candidate in the bunch, but he is a big name, but he won't make the cut.
Okay, the money is on Santorum. Coming up next, Grover Norquist joins us to talk about a new tax plan being hatched in Oregon. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. Thanks for being here.
Well, it's not revenue neutral unless you take away the deduction.
That's where
I know, but I have to.
Let me just.
You haven't given me the math.
No, but well, I don't have the. It would take me too long to go through all of the math.
Great answer.
2012 flashback, courtesy of Stephen Colbert, who, by the way, takes over for CBS Slate Show in September, and David Letterman. Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, they stumbled in 2012 with their plan to slash taxes by 20% across the board. The problem, the math just didn't add up. Fast forward to 2016, the New York Times asked whether Republicans can avoid the Romney tax trap. So far, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Ben Carson all support the flat tax, the same tax rate for everyone, regardless of income. Mike Huckabee favors what he calls the fair tax, or a national sales tax to replace income tax. So let's bring in Grover Norquist, knows a little bit about taxes himself. He's the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Mr. Norquist, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So what do you think is going to be the winning formula for Republicans when it comes to a tax plan and avoid the pitfalls of a Romney-Ryan ticket like we saw in 2012?
One of the advantages is that the CBO and joint tax will score dynamically. So by cutting rates and cutting the capital gains tax, you can actually generate more revenue. The dynamic models show that. And so it'll be easier to have the numbers add up if you're not using static model. That said, they'll all be step one, don't raise taxes. Step two, reduce marginal tax rates. And Rubio is looking at increasing the per-child exemption as well. So I think they'll all have robust tax cuts, and they will score better because the CBO recognizes people change behavior when you cut taxes.
Grover, Heather Hansen here. I think you know that there was an ABC Washington Post poll that said 74% of the public who was polled said that they would vote for a candidate who did not sign your pledge. Given that, and given that President George H.W. Bush signed and then actually raised taxes, do you feel as though perhaps the pledge has lost its relevance?
That's a question I get about every 6 months. And a majority of the members of the House of Representatives have signed the pledge and kept it. As long as the Republicans, who've most of them taken the pledge, held the House, Senate, or the presidency, taxes have not been raised. Since the Republicans took the House back in 2010, no tax has been increased. So the tax pledge holds taxes down, has successfully stopped tax increases, and 96% of the American people think they pay the right amount or too much. So 4% of Americans want higher taxes.
Grover, it's Rick Unger. So, you know, you have been effective, clearly, in keeping much happening in terms of higher taxes. But I know that what you'd really love to see happen is lowering of taxes. How can this ever happen in this country when you have the two biggest expenditures being defense and social programs, and you have part of the population who always wants to increase one or the other, while the other part is against it? Do we ever really get lower taxes, or do we just now stop raising taxes because of somebody like yourself?
Well, step one is don't raise taxes, and thank you, but it's not me, it's the American people who enforce the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. I have one vote. The American people throw out people who vote for tax increases, starting with George Herbert Walker Bush, and anyone else who tends to move in that direction. But I think we have a real opportunity to reduce taxes across the board, because with the sequester for the next 10 years, there's very real limitations on spending increases, and that includes defense spending. For the first time, they're talking about reducing the number of people who are civilian employees in the Pentagon. They're beginning to talk about acquisition reform, which is 30 years overdue. Only the limits on spending have begun the conversation about reforming the Pentagon to effectively provide our defense without wasting as much money.
Hey, Grover, I want to talk briefly about Oregon real quick. It's set to become the first state in the nation to implement a pay-per-mile tax trial program. And drivers basically will have their total mileage recorded and then charged 1.5 cents per mile. They then get credit to offset the fuel at the tax pump. But do you like this idea?
No, this is being put forward as a way to raise taxes and make people not realize it.
And finally, Brad, I know you had a question.
Yeah, Grover, hi, it's Brad Hirschfield. I want to kind of think big with you for a second. It seems to me we're never going to get sound tax policy in this country until we admit the real divide is there are some of us who believe taxes are to pay bills, and others believe it's to redistribute wealth. It's a fairness deal. How do we advance that conversation? Because it seems to me, if you agree with me, we're not going to be able to move on taxes in any meaningful direction until we really surface what the fight is about. And I don't think it's about the numbers. I think it's about the theory that animates them.
Well, and also if you look at some of the programs we have, such as the pensions, which are pretty expensive, if you move from defined benefit pensions to defined contribution, you can dramatically reduce the cost and still make sure everybody gets a pension that's really there as opposed to one that disappears. We reform government to cost less. And that's with welfare programs and with the Pentagon. You can drop government spending, but reform of spending comes first, tax cuts come next.
Okay, very good. Well, Mr. Norquist, we appreciate you joining us. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, and your input was excellent. Again, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, so we only have about 30 seconds to discuss, but any impressions from what Grover said?
Look, I like Grover. He's a good guy, but I got to tell you, I've just never agreed with the concept of anybody promising not to do something that might have to be done.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the concern I think the American public has. You know, that's why they say that they would rather vote for someone who won't make the pledge, because they don't want someone promising to do something that they may have to do.
Yeah, litmus testing is not the way to go on almost any issue. It doesn't make for good policy. Talk about what you believe in, but litmus tests, they're not good.
You surprised that Jeb Bush didn't sign this pledge?
No, I think it takes a real courage to do it, and I appreciate it enormously that he didn't. There's a lot of reasons inside the party to do it, and he said, no, I don't do that.
Okay.
Huntsman didn't do it either, and I liked that.
Yeah, I was about to say, Huntsman didn't do it, and we saw how it worked out for him,
yeah,
so you wonder.
That's different. That's different.
It's different?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what did in John Huntsman.
Right.
That's true. Abby Huntsman, by the way, made the 50 hottest news
She was
people
the first one on there.
voted by Mediaite.
For
I
good
wasn't
reason.
involved with that.
Yes.
Anyway, coming up next, we head to Baltimore for big news on the death of Freddie Gray. This is the Daily Wrap. Stay right there. And welcome back. New developments from Baltimore, where the prosecutor has announced a grand jury has indicted 6 police officers in the death of Freddie Gray. Mr. Gray died last month of a fatal spinal injury while in police custody. Heather, what do these indictments mean?
Well, they're interesting because some of the charges have changed. She charged 3 of the police officers with false imprisonment. And what was really based on, was there probable cause to make this arrest? The indictments, only one of the officers was indicted, and it was on false arrest, which is a similar charge. That is a vital piece of this case, because if the arrest is legal, he cannot resist arrest. He doesn't have the right to do that. If it's illegal, his resisting the arrest is less of a problem. The resisting of the arrest may have been what caused his injuries. So this is what led to the whole problem. It's also, to me, the biggest problem I had with the charges. I think I said it here, that she is charging police officers for making a mistake on the job. And if you start doing that, you're going to find your police officers are less willing to make arrests because they may get arrested for false arrest.
So there's a difference between mistake, because I'm not a lawyer, mistake and intent. In other words, they didn't set out to injure Mr. Gray. Maybe they just didn't strap him in the way they should have.
No,
yeah, help me out here. I'm just a guy watching at home, and I'm trying to absorb what you're saying.
Just the arrest part. Just the arrest part.
Actual
When
just
you
the arrest.
start charging police off, there's different counts, and the things that you're talking about are manslaughter. Now there's some different ones, but manslaughter, all the things that cause.
So break it down
second-degree
in a very simple fashion.
But first, they had to arrest him, and when you charge a police officer, she charged 3 with false imprisonment, which is saying that the arrest was improper.
I understand.
You now set up a standard that police officers have to be concerned that if they are arresting people, they could be criminally charged if they're doing it mistakenly either by law or by fact. So when you see this surge in violence in Baltimore, to me there's a strong argument to be made that these police officers are like, wait a minute, I don't want to be arrested if I mistakenly arrest somebody.
Can the lawyer representing them ask if there's a precedent around this, that they can just say, well, you can't arrest me for false imprisonment?
There's very few.
It's not a precedent scenario. It's just what they're worried about, and I think Heather's probably right about this. If the state's attorney in Baltimore is going to go around charging cops with false imprisonment when they make an arrest, then if I'm a cop, I'm going to go, hey, if it turns out I mismeasured the knife,
right,
and it turns out that the knife was legal and I thought it was illegal, state's attorney's going to have me up on charges. I'm not going to touch the guy.
Do you think this is a political act on her part?
No.
More and more? No? You think she's just doing her job? Because I
Yeah,
don't think
I
Heather
think-
agrees with you.
No, I don't.
I know you don't, but yes, I mean, I can't tell you if the charges will stick. I don't know if these cops or some of them or all of them will be convicted, but clearly something very bad happened
I
here.
don't disagree with you
So
at all on
there
that.
should be charges, and we'll see how the jury shakes it out.
I think the problem that people have with Marilyn Mosby was the speech that she made
Yes.
when the charges were announced. And I call it a speech because that's what it felt like.
was.
It wasn't
was a
just
speech.
a list of 1, 2, 3, here's what's happening. It's I hear your justice, and we need peace, and the whole...
But that doesn't let the
Yeah,
cops
she
off the
called.
No,
Said,
I agree,
I
I
hear
agree.
your call for justice. But you respect the peace while I get you justice. I think there are two separate issues here. The spike in crime can't be attributed to the police. Criminals do crimes, and they have to be held accountable. The fall in arrests, I think, is an issue for the cops. It may be related to this, and it does have to be addressed. They got to be able to do their jobs.
Well, since Gray's death, Baltimore has seen a surge in violence, starting with those riots. Police say there have been 34 murders over the last month. Context is everything. That's a total of 100 homicides this year. Now, here's the context. That compares to 71 murders at this time last year. That's a 30% jump. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake calls the numbers disheartening. She was sharply criticized last month for her comments that seemed to endorse the violence.
It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and the other things that were going on, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. I never said, nor would I ever say, that we are giving people space to destroy our city. So my words should not be twisted.
So, Brad, does the mayor and city leadership in general deserve any sort of blame for the spike in violence?
Well, at the very least, it would be helpful if she would admit that she said what she said. Right? So, of course, there's some blame that's got to be apportioned there. But again, I think it's really important. You blame criminals for the crimes they commit. You blame the city for not having the willingness to enforce laws. And they're two separate issues. So again, prosecute criminals for doing crimes, and then get after the police, but make it appropriate for them to go after the criminals.
Heather.
The issues merged, though, when I think the criminals feel empowered. They feel empowered because they know that the
I got to
police...
disagree with you guys on this one. I really do. This is a heck of a leap you're making. People don't murder people going, I think I'll murder someone today because the mayor said something that was pretty funky and the police aren't. No, that's not.
But
I
what
don't
if
know
the police
why
can't
it's
do their
going
jobs as effectively as they did before, one hand tied behind
Well,
their back?
no. We're talking about arrest there. The police can still patrol. Unfortunately, cops are rarely around when people decide to kill people, and you can't blame them for that. But to suggest that they're sitting there and plotting murders because of a speech
So
that
you're
the mayor
saying
made is silly.
This is an arbitrary jump. That
I
has
don't know
nothing to do with
why it's
anything?
happening, but it ain't that.
I think you're right that that's not why people plot murders, but if people believe that society is broken down and there is no justice except that which they created at the butt of a gun, they're going to kill each other.
They don't do that because of a mayor's speech. They didn't even
This will be going on for a while. More on this in a little bit. Heather's moving to Baltimore, by the way, to practice law. Don't go anywhere. More Daily Wrap in a moment. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, along with my co-hosts Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and Brad Hirschfield. Smiles, everybody, smiles. Have you heard the head of the Boy Scouts says it's time to end the ban on gay scout leaders?
We must deal with the world as it is, not as we might wish it would be. The status quo in our movement's membership standards cannot be sustained. We can expect more councils to openly challenge the current policy.
That's Boy Scouts President Robert Gates. You may recall he helped end the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy as Secretary of Defense. Gates says no change in the policy would be made at the national meeting, but he raised the possibility of revising the policy at some point soon to allow local scout organizations to decide they want to allow gays as adult volunteers and paid staff. So, feeling I'm going to know the answers on this, but I'll ask the question anyway. Should the Boy Scouts change their policy, Brad?
I think they should, with the caveat that Gates also gave in that speech, that local chapters for religious reasons who object to it should have the freedom to not go that way. I think this is Gates at his best and could be scouting at its best. It's the kind of principled pragmatism that calls for maximum inclusion with total respect for people's particular religious values.
Heather, you think this will be another Memories Pizza moment, that if you are a local chapter in a pretty religious town and you say no to this, then suddenly you'll all be labeled as homophobes because protecting your religious religious freedom is suddenly taboo in this country?
I don't think so. I think that there's two issues in play here. I think one is really interesting. He is doing what the Supreme Court tried to do, in that allowing the states to decide, and so that way people could grow into it themselves as opposed to having it forced upon them. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you may think, things moved so fast that the Supreme Court had to back off. I think he also anticipates that this Supreme Court ruling may well say that people's sexual orientation makes them a protected class, and then they won't have a choice. And I think he pretty much said that in some of his statements, so that then he's getting ahead of it. Let's make this decision now, because then we're going to get lawsuits and we will lose.
Are you surprised that Robert Gates is the president of the Boy Scouts?
No. Oh, actually, I knew that he was.
I
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I'm not going to say it's a jump down. It's a very important organization, clearly.
yeah.
But it was just, I had to do a double take when I saw Robert Gates as the president of the Boy Scouts.
I think he
ran wars and
It's
stuff.
not his full-time job.
Okay.
I think he's the
Right,
chairman.
he's not the executive director.
Right.
He's the
Right.
chairman of the board.
Yeah.
But I think they're very related. He has always been about creating great citizens and love of country. And that is at the core of scouting. So I think it's a beautiful place for him to evolve to, actually.
By the way, Heather, that's right. Heather stole my fire, because I was going to say in another 2 weeks, this is a moot conversation.
It is, right?
I think it will be. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what he's anticipating anyway.
That's interesting. Again, that Gates made that jump. I mean, I know it's a big issue.
Citizenship. Think citizenship, think service. Do it this way. Scouts are soldiers, but before they enter the service. It's another form of national service that tries to evoke the best character in the service of the country.
Scouts or what? Before they...
In others, imagine a Boy
I was
Scout.
a Scout. I didn't go in the service.
I was too. It's a different story, but okay. But imagine the same...
To do my best, to do my...
Right, and that's what you want from soldiers
You
and
were
from
a scout.
citizens.
I was
Sure,
indeed.
do my best and do my
Wow, what level did you get to? Are there levels? Because I clearly
I think
wasn't.
I went down 2 levels. I'm not...
Really? Brad, you were one as well.
I had a
Remember,
minus
all
one
this really
handicap.
started when Eagle Scouts, that's the highest level, were denied Eagle status because they were out gays.
Right.
And people began to say, you know, it ought to be okay to say to someone, I don't agree with your sexual choices or your biology, that's a fight we're not going to have now, but it shouldn't get in the way of acknowledging that you're actually a fine person serving your community and your country. And that's actually what happened. Once that happened, it all starts to be accepted.
Don't you
in a
think
good
it's
way.
odd that this issue has never come up with the Brownies? I mean, there are gay women, no doubt, who have led Brownie
Yes,
groups.
for sure.
And
for sure.
it's never come up. What's that
Women
all
are
about?
so much more evolved. That's why we don't fight about these
What's
things.
that? I mean,
Well,
Every
there's
step
there's
makes
no
a difference.
question that gay maleness in the culture evokes all kinds of fears and concerns that gay femaleness doesn't. And that's just, it shouldn't be that way, but it is that way, and I think you're absolutely right, but it's okay, we'll
Give
solve
me
it
a
here.
prediction. Give me a prediction on the percentage of local chapters that will reject a gay adult supervisor or volunteer. 30%, 20%?
I think more. I would go about half.
You go
because
half.
remember, a huge percentage of these chapters are hosted by more conservative religious communities. That's one of the things to notice. The conservative
But
religious
when you
communities.
imagine that in those communities, do you really think that gay men were volunteering to work with the...
Maybe they don't live there in the first
No,
place.
they're not going to let them in. And I think that'll be really interesting to notice that the number of places that actually nurture the great values of scouting also turn out to be, and here I am editorializing, behind in thinking about the place of gay people.
You're a
in the
panelist
country.
on a show where we discuss stuff all the time. That's all you're supposed to do is
Well, I know,
editorialize.
but this one is so divisive, and I want to respect people's views I really don't share, and I think these churches do amazing things
Brad
hosting these
presumes
chapters.
if he says it, it's a truth fact, so it's not editorializing.
Oh, there you go.
Heather, I didn't get your
On
prediction,
this
by the
one,
way.
yes.
for
It was too
percentage.
long. I was going to talk about water guns. We'll do it another time.
What, super
Boy
soakers, or-
Is that about water
Scouts,
guns?
Boy Scouts,
Now we're going to a
Boy Scouts have
subject
said no
I'm
more
into.
water guns, and so there's something
We'll see.
interesting to talk about.
Really?
there.
They should
Okay.
throw him out for that.
Okay, we're going to
No water.
move on. Boy Scouts. Can't believe you two more Boy Scouts. Anyway, Letterman left them laughing. We have all the highlights. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to The Late Show. I want to tell you one thing. I'll be honest with you. It's beginning to look like I'm not going to get the Tonight Show. I don't think.
And if you didn't see the show last night, check it out online. Classy send-off, creative send-off by CBS last night. The show also pulled huge ratings as expected, easily won the night, but as a matter of fact, the last time Letterman pulled similar ratings was in 1994. Here is more of last night's monologue.
Here's the problem. When I screw up now, and Lord knows I'll be screwing up, I have to go on somebody else's show to apologize.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
And today, the New York Post reported that CBS was already taking down the Letterman set and throwing it in a dumpster outside the Ed Sullivan Theater. You should have gone today. You could have got that on camera.
Isn't that depressing?
It's insane. Even part of the iconic Brooklyn Bridge that sat behind Dave,
look at that.
Destroyed. Why did they donate it to us? Or, you know, I would imagine a television museum would probably want to get their hands on that. Or something.
An architecture program?
Yes. You know, kids in a community access show, something. But to throw it out.
That's how TV works. It really is.
It is. Huh?
I've had it happen to me, and it's the most depressing thing in the world.
Yeah.
It really is.
Wow.
They waste no time. But to be fair, they will start constructing Steve Colbert's set Monday.
They will.
Yes.
Okay. And your thoughts on Mr. Colbert's chances in late night?
Well, he's not as good as Joe Concha, as we discussed with the folks out there last night.
I'm not in late night. I'm in
but
early prime.
I think he's going to be fine. Yeah, he's a very funny guy. This concern that he's played this other character, this doesn't mean he's limited to playing that other character. These people know what they're doing when they pick these guys.
My philosophy on Colbert is that they wanted a Jon Stewart, but he makes $30 million a year. Or I even suggested Howard Stern, but Howard makes something like $50 million a year. Ellen, if you wanted to put a woman in there, oh, she's cheap, right? She makes $75 million a year. So the big names you could put in there, way too expensive. Colbert only made about $2 million a year at Comedy Central, so you give him like 8 or 9 here, and Letterman made about 20. You're getting possibly a good stock, low stock, and then who knows where he can go. I personally think that he.
Plus, we know what Stewart was thinking now. Stewart wanted to retire from doing a talk show.
Right, he wanted to stop. And I want to be clear, I would have done it for 3. So if they're looking for a discount. One of the stories on this I want to throw in that is interesting was one of the class acts of last night was Conan O'Brien, who actually turned to his audience and said, watch the other show.
You think his advertisers agree he was a
well,
class
so
act?
here's the thing. I actually raised that with you before the show, and I think they did. And here's why. I think he behaved entirely properly. He actually built the brand of the Conan O'Brien show as a classy place. And I think in the short run, the advertisers were annoyed, but they're wrong. The truth is, he's now the kind of show their advertisers people want.
Respectfully, what you're missing is that you don't necessarily have a claim on that advertising for every show. Anybody who bought spot advertising in yesterday's show is getting their money back, but they're not happy about it.
That's true, but they'll get their money back. He behaved like a classy guy.
They have a movie running this weekend?
Do you really think anybody who tuned in changed the channel because he said so? I think they knew Letterman was going to be on.
About a half hour after.
You see Conan's ratings, no one was really watching in the first place. But now, with that, Leno was taking a shot at. I'm sorry, Conan was taking a shot at Leno as well because Letterman, the enemy of your enemy is your friend type of thing. So I could see that. Anyway, Letterman's top 10 list, absolutely iconic. Top 10 things I've always wanted to say to Dave. Take it.
Of all the talk shows, yours is most geographically convenient to my home.
Dave, did you know that you wear the same cologne as Muammar Gaddafi?
Yes, Barbara.
Your extensive plastic surgery was a necessity and a mistake.
Dave, I have no idea what I'll do when you go off the air. You know, I just thought of something. I'll be fine.
Honestly, Dave, I've always found you to be a bit of an overactor.
I'm just glad your show is being given to another white guy.
Thanks for letting me take part in another hugely disappointing series finale.
Dave, you are to comedy what I am to comedy.
Thanks for finally proving men can be funny.
Dave, I'll never have the money I owe you.
Oh, no.
Jim Carrey looked like the Unabomber.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
I'm hoping that's for
Him
a
at his
part.
best.
He's
I'm
great.
hoping that's for a
So
part.
that's Letterman's legacy right there, the top 10 list, right? Out of all of it, that's what he'll be remembered for most.
Stupid pet tricks.
Stupid
And
pet
stupid
tricks,
pet
right.
tricks, yeah. But the top 10 list, I mean, that
No
can never be
doubt.
duplicated, right?
Absolutely.
And they were all
no,
great.
Nobody would dare. Yeah, that's it.
No
You've
way.
seen the end of it.
You have,
That's
right?
right. That was the
Someone
last
will have
one.
to create something
That's
that
right.
will be to that what it was to its predecessors.
Like Jimmy Fallon's lip sync battle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which I love.
Exactly.
Right, but we'll never see someone as big as a Letterman or a Leno again because it's just so fractured now.
And people don't watch it
And
anymore.
people don't watch
They
it.
watch
It
it
doesn't
in
have to be
clips.
appointment viewing because you could watch it
Actually,
online.
that's not necessarily true. I think Jimmy Fallon's getting better ratings than Leno was getting.
Really? We'll have to
I
look
think
that
so.
up. Okay, well, yay or nay is next. We got a great one for you. Stick right there. It's happy time, people. It must be time for Yay or Nay, the little game where everybody wins. First up, CBS and Viacom Executive Chairman Sumner Redstone is turning 92. But instead of having some cake and some cookies, Mr. Redstone is channeling Charlie Sheen and having a blowout. Redstone is having a passion party being hosted by two of his girlfriends. He only has two? But I mentioned he's 92 years young. Question, will you be attending Sumner Redstone's 92nd birthday passion party? Rick Unger, you're close with him.
I wasn't invited to Sumner's party, but last night we said that 65 is the new 25, so 92 is the new, what, 89?
Yeah, that sounds about
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Good math. Go ahead.
If invited, I would go. I mean, what a great party that would be, right?
Would you be Sumner's third girlfriend?
No way.
Really?
No, I think he's
Good.
got his hands full. He seems like he's just about
Okay,
done
that
with
will can be
those
very
two.
easily modified,
That's
though.
just fine. I'll be
Okay.
all right.
Well, his hands and what's full now. Don't go there. What I noticed in these pictures, though, he and the Donald are getting the hair done by the same guy. That's amazing.
That's a very good point.
Look at that.
I like how he's tied the knot on the tie. Kind of.
I don't think he
it's
tied
horrible.
it.
It's
Walking
horrible.
Dead comes to mind there.
Yeah, oh boy, good lord, Brad. The bookkeeper at Auschwitz, 93-year-old Oscar Groening, tremendous transition, is being tried for war crimes while he was an SS member of the Nazis during World War II. He is accused of participating in the deaths of at least 300,000 people. Well, the trial has been suspended because he's not feeling too well. Question. Is this old Nazi bookkeeper, like Uncle Junior in The Sopranos, faking his illness to avoid being prosecuted, Brad?
I don't think he is. He is a German in every stereotypical sense, and said he welcomes this trial to determine whether or not he really is guilty. Pretty scary thought, but I don't think he's faking it. I think he's sick.
Heather.
You know what? Trials are extremely stressful, and we all get sick during or afterwards, so I don't think he's faking either.
Rick, you've been on trial before. Have you ever
Yeah,
got
but honestly, why do we care about this man? This guy, I hope
care if he serves his
is.
crime.
I hope he is sick every minute that he's got left. So.
Okay. Another transition to make. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton must need a job because she just joined LinkedIn. If you're not familiar with LinkedIn, it's a social media network where you can display your resume and your accomplishments. People give you a thumbs up and all. It's quite annoying sometimes. But Hillary obviously doesn't need a job. She's making pretty good money, or had made pretty good money. So is Hillary simply trying a bit too hard to be like us by having a LinkedIn page, Brad?
I think this is dopier than Chipotle. So if she could out Chipotle, more power to it. It's ridiculous.
Fascinating. Heather.
Her super PAC isn't doing as well as they had hoped. Maybe she thinks it's another way to raise money.
True.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. That was stupid.
just bonehead.
Do you all have LinkedIn pages?
You think she's
Yes or
going to
no?
friend me?
I
I
do.
do, yeah.
You do?
I have a
Yeah.
feeling Hillary won't be friending me on
No, I don't think so.
me either,
You can
so-
reach out to her.
I'll reach out.
Do you ever
There you go.
understand when somebody endorses you for a skill?
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with anything you're good at?
Fascinating.
Is it automatic, or does somebody actually do something?
somebody
No,
actually presses
someone's
the button.
actually doing that. They
Why
are
do they have so
choosing
much
you.
time on their hands
And with
if they're
me,
writing down you're good at
it's
this,
this
and
weird
this?
guy I barely know, and it's like always at 4 o'clock in the morning and like endorses me for like faxing. It's like, what? No. Anyway, finally, did you hear, this is fascinating, about the books that were found during the raid of Osama bin Laden's compound in Pakistan? Fascinating book selection and quite diverse. Look at some of these. Noam Chomsky, okay, he likes liberals. The New Pearl Harbor, Disturbing Questions. Obama's Wars, Bob Woodward, bestseller. But there was one that really stood out, particularly to us at the Daily Wrap. Turns out the world's most wanted man also has an affinity for the law and Italian food.
Oh,
Check
geez.
out this book found. This was on his nightstand right before he got shot in the
boy.
head. Laundering and
That's
Lasagna,
fabulous.
How to Win in the Courtroom and the Kitchen. That is the bestseller by Heather Hansen, currently
If he
number 4 on Amazon.
If he was eating out of that cookbook, he would have starved to death before we got him, because I
Really?
did not cook at all.
You use your stove for storage,
Storing my
basically?
books, yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's about right. So he would not be doing
So
too
you had a
well.
ghostwriter that just made up the recipes for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good for you. That was actually his nightstand. The other ones were like stocked away, so
Yeah.
maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was reading for the pictures.
That's right. He did have some
Someone
stuff
has
there
to.
that no one's talking
Heather
about.
been
Worse, could have been 50 Shades of Grey.
There you go, please.
They may uncover that in another compound he was
Maybe
at
they
some
found
point.
some stuff similar to that.
Maybe.
Yes, they did.
Anyway, good to see you all today. Enjoy your weekend if I don't see you again. And that will do it for today. Stay tuned for Newsmax Prime with J.D. Hayworth. Bye-bye, everybody.